Are bad things happening in your life? Maybe it's due to spiritual attachments and negative entities. This is Robert Manni, host of Guys TV, and this week my special guest is Ellie Pechet, metaphysician. It all starts right here, right now on Guys TV. You can also catch me on KCAA Radio here in Southern California, Guys Radio, my worldwide podcast, and we're on UK Health Radio all weekend long. Guys TV, Guys Radio, thanks for your support. Okay, Guys Radio is the interview portion of our show, and today we are going to talk about two main areas: clearing spirit attachments and negative entities, and also eliminating emotional and physical issues with my special guest, first time on Guys Radio, Ellie Pechet. And Ellie is a metaphysician, medium, shaman, and an author with over 38 experience in the intuitive counseling energy field. Her private practice as an intuitive counselor, medium, shaman, and metaphysician, Ellie helps clients all over the world using her distance healing, intuitive therapy, and Pechet Healing Technique. Clients benefit from remote healing remotely, also, or at her Orange County home, eliminating emotional and physical pain. She's got a book right here. It's called Hitching a Ride, a Guide to Earthbound Spirits and How They Affect You. And I also can say that Ellie worked with me over this past week, and we'll get into what happened during that session, so you'll get a sense as to how Ellie works. So welcome to Guys Radio, Ellie Pechet.
Thanks, Robert. It's really good to be here. Nice to see you again.
You too. Let's start with right at the beginning. People be curious about kind of who is Ellie and kind of what makes her different. So tell us a little bit about like what happened to you and how you knew you had some type of spiritual gifts. I know in your book, you mentioned a couple of past lives and you've gone through kind of this working as a quote unquote healer in various incarnations. And now you're working to help people overcome things in this life. Tell us what happened when you noticed that you had this gift as a child.
I didn't realize I had the gift as a child. I was literally growing up in a war zone. My parents basically escaped Romania during right after the Holocaust, and so they brought a lot of darkness with them. And I incarnated. I didn't realize this until I was an adult, obviously, but I incarnated to bring light to them from to offset all the darkness that they had experienced and brought with them. And it didn't go too well for me. That they almost put out my light. So it was pretty intense growing up, and my gifts and abilities unfolded more as an adult, as a young adult, and not sure if I'm answering your question.
Okay, let me rephrase it. When did you notice that you had some type of gifts? Could you kind of was it clairaudient? Were you psychic, or could you do things work with people, or remote viewing, or what was it? How did you know? What gift did you have, and how did you know you had it?
I have a very high level of intuition, and it comes into play when I'm in session. I have the ability to link up when I'm with a client and literally hear what they most need me to clear for them that session. And me as the personality could kind of assume it might be this or it might be that, but when I link up, I get really clear, accurate guidance as to what needs to be cleared for them.
And where does that come from?
Linking up to source.
Okay.
We're all part of source.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to have been a healer and working as a shaman in many past lifetimes. So it's not something new for me. It's pretty familiar to be able to link up and help.
Okay.
the ones I'm working with.
Now, how did you know, in your opinion, that you had been doing this in past lives?
Oh gosh, just either having memories of those past lifetimes,
Mhm.
remembering how to do certain things that I didn't learn in this life, like the first time that I was able to detect the spirit of an old woman inside of a client that I was in session with. All of a sudden, I just had the awareness that there was a spirit inside of her. And as I tuned in, like you might tune in with the radio, like the old-fashioned radio, the
The
dial.
frequency, yeah.
It's frequency. So as I tuned in more closely, I saw that it was an old woman who was inside of this client, and she was afraid to move on and needed help moving on to the light. And so I instinctively just, it's going to sound strange, but I entered the client energetically and sat and talked with the woman very, very gently, very lovingly, and explained to her that she would be much better off if she allowed me to help her go to the light, and that her soul would be able to move on because it was stuck as long as she was earthbound and inside of this woman. And then eventually, it didn't take too long. She was ready, and I still remember this, letting me carry her out of the woman, it, in my arms, and calling on her guides and angels, and they took her to the light.
Okay.
So that was all instinct. That wasn't anything I learned or
Okay.
studied or read.
How did how did she get in there, and how to with entities? Because there's two areas you really work with, and the book is
Yeah.
about that: hitching a ride, a guide to earthbound spirits and how they affect you, clearing spirit attachments and negative entities, and eliminating emotional and physical issues. Let's talk about the spirit attachment and negative entities. What happens there? How do they get, like, how did this lady and other entities get into people? And is everybody carrying around some type of these attachments and entities?
That's a good question, Robert. So I would say that almost a majority of people do have one or more spirit attachments either around them, hovering around them, or inside of them that they're not aware of. And that was a big motivation for me writing my book, was to raise the awareness of the public that this is a real issue, that people really do become earthbound when they die, sometimes, not always. And there are other types of entities that can be more harmful than people, like demons, that I also remove. But in answer to your question, what happens is, say we're dealing with a random spirit attachment. Someone might go to, gosh, it could happen almost anywhere, but there are places where it's more likely that there will be earthbound spirits hanging around waiting for someone to latch onto. So, say like a scary movie, like a horror movie. Um, there
It's
could
a,
be someone, in there, in earthbound spirit, that latches onto a person, and initially they hover around them outside, outside the person's physical being. And they might say to themselves, hey, this person's pretty cool, or I used to smoke and I miss it, and this person is a smoker. So, maybe I'll hang out with this person. And then they'll follow them out of the movie theater, for example. And eventually, and it doesn't have to take too long, because they're pure energy. I mean, we're energy too, but we have our
mm,
physical vessel. But because earthbound spirits are pure energy, they can pretty much go wherever they want. So it's very easy for them to slip into the person. And then all of a sudden, the person has a spirit attachment inside of them. and they act like they're kind of like a parasite because they feed on their energy, they affect their personality, they get them to do things that they might not normally do.
Hmm.
They drain them, and that's why I wrote the book is
Okay.
to share the information.
So let's take a step back then. So
Yeah.
what, because these entities, these energetic entities, obviously have passed and they have not gone on to the light, if you will, or wherever they're supposed to go, and they're kind of hanging around Earth. I've heard, like you mentioned, you go to a scary movie, it could be a bar, and people drink, and
Oh yeah.
your guard's down, and then other
Yes,
people who hang out at
that's
the
right.
bar who are passed can kind of
Yes,
hop into you. So
that's right.
what happens when we die? And then why are some of these, so many of these energetic entities, if you will, kind of still milling around Earth and not sure how to kind of get to where they're supposed to go? And also, as part of this, a lot of people talk about, going to the light and as a good thing. And some people say, no, don't go to the light, look behind you or something. What's your perspective? What happens when we die? Should we go to the light? And et cetera.
Absolutely. It's really important that we go to the light and I like to use the word transition because it's a more gentle uh, term than dying. Dying doesn't really, it has kind of a thud, you
Right.
know?
Sure.
So uh, it's really important that when people make the transition, that they don't get stuck on the earth plane, that they do move on to the light so that that there's a whole process that needs to happen for every soul when they transition. And one of the most important pieces is the going through a life review. Super important because they get to witness everything that they did in their most recent life, uh, and without judgment. There isn't judgment. It's all about learning and developing the soul. Every life is meant to develop the soul that much further. Does that make sense?
Yes, of course, it makes perfect sense. So when we sign up for these lifetimes, and I want to actually build this out for our audience, we make contracts as to here's what I'm going to do, and do we have a team that says, okay, I'm going to play this role, and they might be our soul family, if you will, and some might come in terms of when we get to Earth on a physical family, but we have a role. So if is that the case, number one, and number two, can we change? Because I feel I've changed my contract. I've adjusted it along the way. And as part of that, part three, forgive me, do we have exit points along the way? Potential exit points.
So what would your first question be?
My first question was, okay, what do we have contracts when we're going to come into this life as to what we're supposed to
We
accomplish?
do. We do. And it's because our soul wants to experience certain things that maybe it hasn't experienced before, or maybe it needs to get resolution over a pattern that the soul has experienced in previous lifetimes. And the soul wants to get closure to that pattern so that it can move on. So I would say yes, there are agreements, and we plan out our life before we incarnate,
Do
but
we
we don't
choose?
remember. We forget when we land on Earth, when
Do,
we're born.
do we choose our parents and our friends or anybody?
Yeah, we choose our parents. Like I said, I chose a really difficult one this lifetime. I really wanted to to bring light to my parents, and uh yeah, it was
Okay.
very challenging.
Okay. My
Yeah.
special guest on Guys Radio, Ellie Pechet. She is an M.Ed, and we're talking about eliminating emotional, physical issues as well as clearing spiritual attachments and negative entities. All about her book, Hitching a Ride. So let's go back to when somebody passes. So we pass and we see the light, and you suggest that we should go to it. The reason I said, is that always a good idea? Because I have heard and read and talked to other folks who said, no, you're going to get caught in a kind of a karmic loop where you'll just go back to the same thing, and it's not a great idea. Thoughts?
I have never heard that. That doesn't make any sense. It's completely counterintuitive if you think about it. The I mean, Earth is like a boot camp, don't you
Mhm.
think?
Well, it depends on how you define a boot camp. I mean, some say, the people who say you don't want to go back because the situation we're in is very repressive. It's not as free as it can be. And we're just getting caught in this kind of loop where we keep going back and have to struggle all the time. I'm not saying that's my perspective. I'm saying this
Yeah.
is what I've read and heard.
No, yeah,
You disagree.
I disagree. My
Okay.
understanding is that the life review and the series of steps that need to happen when we do go back to the light are, the going home is like a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
It's like coming home to a warm bed and delicious food and wonderful support after serving in a war or
Okay.
something, just as an example. So no, we want to go to the light. And one of the reasons that spirits can become earthbound is if they die suddenly, like in a car accident or an accidental uh, drug overdose, or if they're killed, uh, uh, like in a kind of a freak
So they're not ready.
situation.
It's not like they had a long-term illness and they had time to plan
Right,
that.
to
That's what you're, oh,
process
it's a
and
surprise.
plan.
Okay.
Exactly. So anyway,
But
so
if the light shows up there, wouldn't they figure they're not going, they don't know they're dead? Is that what you're saying?
when people die traumatically and
Mhm.
suddenly, they often do not know that they don't realize that they're dead, and they become confused, and so they latch on to whatever they can that will help them feel some sense of security. And that's one example. Another example of when people can become earthbound is if, say, they grew up Catholic, just for example,
Mhm.
where there's a lot of, it tends to be, that religion tends to be a little punitive, and a lot of kind of blame and a lot of like fear,
Right.
creating fear, especially in the children, to get them to behave. And so when these fears are very real for these individuals. And so when they make the transition, because they're afraid that they're going to probably get punished, they can consciously choose not to leave and to stay here on the earth.
Mhm. Is that a set amount of time that they decide that I'm just going to stay on Earth and wander around in this kind of in between world?
Until someone like myself runs into them, or a client asks me to check on a loved one to see if they did go to the light or not, and if they didn't, then I can escort them and
Okay.
and basically free them.
Okay. So if somebody dies in a typical fashion where they have not become an earthbound spirit, they die, they go to the light. Are they met on the other side? Who gives them their life review? What happens after their life review? And what's the determination as to when they would come back to Earth? And would it be necessarily to Earth or someplace else? So kind of what happens after you go through the light and you're met, and what
I you
happens?
know I would recommend Sylvia Browne. I have tremendous respect for her. Uh, she is no longer with us, but she wrote a lot of books, and in one of the books, I think the title is uh,
It's okay.
something.
I've got you on the show, so I just want to get your perspective, Ellie.
Yeah. Basically, I can't outline all of the steps, but I was going to say that she does a really nice job of outlining them in her book. I think it's called, yeah, it's Temples on the Other Side.
Okay.
Yeah, so she really gets into that. I speak more generally, and really my role here is to help those that get stuck, help
Okay.
them
All right.
transition.
So let's move to that. What was some of the more interesting removals of entities from people that you've worked with? Ellie.
A friend who had she had a little bit of a drinking problem, and but she was really brilliant, and I cared for her very deeply in the little bit of time that we got together. And she had an argument with her husband one night, and he left the house, and then her license had been revoked, for driving under the influence. And so she would ride her bicycle when she needed to get out and go somewhere. She was very successful, very, as far as her career. But she was a bit of a tortured soul. Anyway, she went out this one night and it was raining and she was on her bicycle and she got hit by a car and died almost instantly. So I went to visit Massachusetts for a few days. I was speaking at a conference, and I decided to take a week vacation. And the husband reached out to me and asked me to come to the house and just, kind of, talk and connect. And so I went, and he and I were sitting at the kitchen table. And I when I tuned in, I realized that she was earthbound. She had not gone to the light after that, after being killed by being hit by a car.
Mhm.
And so I guided her to the light, and that was one of the I
Beautiful.
mean, it just felt really important, and it felt
Mhm.
really good to do to help her.
Now, do you have to do some type of protection for yourself? Because I'm sure when you're dealing with these entities, some of them probably are not that benevolent.
Well, the word entities is best
Or,
used for like demons and beings that are non-human,
mhm.
and there's quite a bit of it. And I don't know if you want to get into that. There's reptilian beings, there's like I said, there's demons, there's all types. And uh, I, as far as the uh, humans who get stuck on the earth, I tend to call them earthbound
Okay.
spirits because they are a spirit, and they become earthbound.
Okay. How about the some of these? But you mentioned there's some demonic or bad entities that attach to people sometimes. When you're working with these people to remove them, what do you need to do to protect yourself?
Oh, yeah. So I call on Archangel Michael. I've got a number of things that I do to protect myself. And uh, I don't get attacked when I'm working with clients. If I ever get attacked, it's more when I'm out in public and I forget and leave my guard down.
Mhm. So, do you call on like divine God's white light of protection around you each and every day?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And then if I realize that something has attached to me, will realize it pretty quickly,
Hmm.
and I can, send it away, send it where
Okay.
it needs to go. Like, for example, earthbound spirits go to the light so that they can move on. Demons prefer going into the underworld, which is, their more natural place that
Habitat.
they like to
Okay.
be. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the different types of work. We talked about your attachment and entities, you take those away, and then you do some physical work too. People who have depression, anxiety, fear, panic attacks, phobias, insomnia, all kinds of stuff could be fibromyalgia, stiffness, pain, sciatica, all kinds of physical stuff. How is it different in the way you work with removing entities than dealing with physical maladies?
I I much prefer clearing emotional and physical issues for people.
Mm-hmm.
The dark stuff is what I call the more creepy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's not my favorite, but
Okay.
I know how to do it and I'm good at it, so I do it. But yeah, I
What
can clear things like depression and insomnia, pretty much most things.
what do most people come to you for, Ellie?
It runs the gamut, you know. I'll start working with a client and clear her maybe depression, anxiety, guilt over something that happened, or for example, how uh, maybe guilt about past decisions with a child or past actions. And when they feel a lot better and they feel like, I've helped resolve their issues for good, then they will hire me to start working with their children.
Okay.
And generally with children or parents or other relatives, uh, a lot of times they're not all on board, like the
Of course.
client who came to me. And so uh, the way that I work with them is I ask for their higher self's permission, and the higher self always wants what's best for the individual. Just it always does. And then I can work with them using their picture. I put it on my iPod and I will clear whatever needs to be cleared. I clear one issue every session, whether it's always something big. But I'll work with their picture on the iPod and I'll get a little bit of information like their name, their age, and then what the issues are that are concerning the parent or the offspring. And then it's like it is like a miracle. Like the
Mm-hmm.
client will report back to me and say, hey, this is gone, she's so much better, and they thank me. They're very, very grateful, and it's a lot cheaper than years of therapy, and it's a lot more effective.
Okay. My special guest, Ellie Pechet, Hitching, a Ride, Guide to Earthbound Spirits and How They Affect You. Okay, so you worked with me. You were kind enough to give me a session, and we didn't get into entities or anything, so I'm assuming I didn't have an issue there, but I came up with an issue in terms of just kind of wanting to clear my path. That sometimes I feel that, and I'll be honest with this on air, that sometimes I have to work too hard for certain things, and sometimes you shouldn't have to work as hard as you work to have things if they're lined up the right way energetically. So we work together. So why don't I can say how I felt, but why don't you, Ellie, lead by saying, here's what I did with you, and then I will chime in.
Oh, sure. Well, the first thing that I did with you that I always do is I balanced you, uh, and then I raised your vital life force. Do you remember feeling? I think you said you felt calm pretty
Yeah.
quickly
Mm-hmm.
and deeply relaxed. And after I raise your vital life force, then I go on to clear whatever the issue is that I intuited.
Okay. And it
Do you
was the
remember?
same. Yes. Was it the same as what I was thinking it was? And then you articulated it and we got to kind of a phrase to deal with that. Is that kind of how you work it?
Um, in a sense, I will actually like you and were dialoguing,
Right.
and then all of a sudden, if you remember, I stopped and I linked up and I heard the exact phrase
Okay.
that was the best thing to clear for you. Do you remember?
Yes. Yes. Okay. And from there, this took about, I don't know. We were doing it for a while. I don't know what the time was because I was kind of in the zone and you were
Yeah.
working with me. So what else did you do? Did you balance? I think you mentioned you balanced my chakras afterwards and you embedded kind of the affirmation that I had into me. So how
Yeah,
does that
I call it the imprint.
imprint? Okay.
And so one of the things that makes my work really successful is that I work with the neural pathways, and
Mhm.
that's where things get stuck, and that's where things can be programmed. And so the issue that came up for you, I cleared it from your neural pathways and then each energy center within you.
Mhm.
And then when I did the imprint at the end, uh, I programmed.
Mhm.
Well, I don't
It's
know if
like a
that sounds kind
kind of
of
like you
weird, but
rewired and kind of locked it in then. So
yeah, it's like a rewiring
mhm.
for that specific issue that
Mhm.
came up for that session, and it's always something really important and significant for you. But the other thing I did, Robert, was, um, and I do this every session with every client, is first I clear the issue in this life, and then I clear it in any past lifetimes.
Mhm.
So the pattern is completely complete. It's
Mhm.
done. It's finished. And that's why I can clear, a significant session in one time, like
Mhm.
every time. And then we can go on to the next issue.
Well, I have to say, I feel after since the session, I felt clear, like unobstructed. So that's a good thing because of what my kind of quote unquote issue was. It's going to be ongoing. It's not like I had a physical issue and it went away. Like I had a knee pain, it went away. This is more of something. Will things start to happen easier for me because I always feel like I've had to like claw my way in like so many aspects of my life. Not that nobody else has to do that, but for me, it just felt like I seem to be working a little bit harder than I think I need to be working. And I think what you did cleared a path where I feel the path ahead of me is unobstructed. But the proof will be in the pudding. We'll see. We'll see how it works. But I felt that you were effective, and I enjoyed working with you. And I recommend your services to people because uh, I just felt that, and you have to go by your intuition that,
Yeah.
and you knowing that like this is a good thing, and I liked your process also. So is this typical of what we did? Not specifically the issue, but of how you worked with some type of a blockage or something.
Yeah. Yeah. It was typical. It could have been anything. It could have been um, you know, so a a lot of times something that is emotional will manifest physically.
Mm-hmm.
And a common one that I help people with is low back pain, and that's often related to uh, worries about money and finances, and that's where it shows up. So in fact, sometimes I can clear the issue about, fear of lack, fear of not having enough, and then the back pain goes away.
Mm-hmm. What is the biggest? What's been the most challenging case that you've had without mentioning this? I don't need. We don't need a name or anything, but just something, an issue that was like, wow, this is a big one. And what was the breakthrough on that? How did that work?
Ooh, boy. Um,
I'm sure you've had some big ones,
I've had a
like,
lot of big ones.
and
I mean, I
it
have
could.
I've got a quote I could read from a scientist who I worked with, if you like, and he
Sure.
had he had a real problem with insomnia. So he writes, I am amazed at how you can sense things from a distance. I definitely feel a difference, lighter, calmer, and more peaceful as the result of our work. And best of all, the depression and insomnia are gone. So the
So,
insomnia was a real issue for him. And the way that I helped him with that uh, was I tuned in and I saw that he had a past life where he was a Native American in a tribe, and he was watching over the tribe one night. He had like guard duty,
mhm.
to protect the tribe, and he fell asleep. He was very tired and he fell asleep, and they were attacked, and his tribe was decimated. So he couldn't forgive himself for that. It was very, very traumatic. And he carried that with him in his soul memory, and it's what surfaced as not being able to sleep in this life, because God forbid if he falls asleep and something really bad happens. So for him, I cleared that past life, that Native American life, and that took care of it. And then he was able to sleep fine.
Amazing. So when you were working with me, if I may ask, what did you see, if anything, in past lives that affected, in general, and anything that affected kind of this life?
Well, I can grab my notes from the session
Okay.
and
Am I?
see.
Okay. While Ellie's looking, just a quick review of her book, Hitching a Ride, A Guide to Earthbound Spirits and How They Affect You. Ellie Pechet, M.Ed. And we're getting into the kind of a work that Ellie did with me a couple of days ago that I felt was very effective and very appreciative of that. So what do we got, Ellie? Anything?
Yeah, it was good working with you. So I don't always see past lives. Sometimes there isn't, time to see, and it's not even important.
Mm-hmm.
What's important is that I clear the pattern of whatever the issue is that I'm clearing that session. Do you want me to share? You probably
In
don't want me
general,
to share the issue, right?
well, what I stated the issue as kind of things kind of making I'm making things too hard on myself. Let's
Yeah,
call it that.
right. So yeah, so yeah, basically I without, going into too much detail, I cleared some frustration for you around that issue. And I think what's important to focus on is the imprint, which came through as you being successful on every level,
Okay,
if you remember. And
I do remember.
so I do the energetic imprint with this hand as far as you're imprinting the neural pathways, each energy center. And while I'm doing that, you are affirming
Okay, and how do you see
the
things?
same thing. So
Mhm.
you
What do you see when you're looking at like neural pathways? Like what is it exactly that you see visually?
it's really more energetic.
Okay.
It's really just this ability that I have to send energy in a highly effective, highly potent way. And I do actually I am able to actually dissolve issues that are not helpful, that are counterproductive. So it's the combination of dissolving the issue, the top issue, and then doing the imprint of what it is that you do want.
Got it. Okay. Last question here. Yeah, I found this very provocative, so I wanted to make sure we got this in. Tell us about the time you were sent as a representative of the light to meet with the Dark Council.
Oh my goodness. Well,
Just the
uh,
abbreviated version.
yeah, the abbreviated, it is abbreviated. That was an interesting experience in which I almost ended up getting taken over by the dark. And I can remember this, even though it was so long ago. They started to close in on me. I was there to negotiate with them and talk with them. And the light and the dark do actually negotiate, and they make agreements. And sometimes the light will take a turn, sometimes the dark will take a turn. It's much more complicated than we have time to get into now.
Okay.
But I went there to negotiate, as you said, as a representative of the light. And I almost stayed a little bit, I stayed almost a little bit too long, to where they started to move toward me and would have taken me over. And fortunately, I got out of there. I realized what was happening, and I got out of there.
Amazing. Okay. Wow. Ellie Pechet, you've got a lot of stories. It's amazing work. You're different than anybody I've ever interviewed, and that's a good thing. Hitching a Ride, a guide to earthbound spirits and how they affect you. Ellie Pechet, M.Ed. Where can people find out more about you and get your book?
Sure. They can get the book and go to my website, which is phoenixrisinghealing.com. And they can also reach me, from there by email or by phone.
Fantastic. PhoenixRisingHealing.com. Ellie Pechet, Guys Radio. Thanks for being here. You're amazing.
Oh, thanks. It's good to meet with you again.
If you enjoy the guests and content I bring you each and every week to Guys TV and Guys Radio, please support us by subscribing to our channels and platforms. Thank you.